Hello, 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 and welcome. I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, Director of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. I want to thank you for tuning in for tonight's event. I hope you're all staying sane out there, which is definitely easier said than done these days. Here's how this event is going to work tonight. I have a few words to say, and then I'll be leaving the screen. At which point, if everything works the way it should, we will be transported to John Gibson's studio in Greenfield, Massachusetts, where he's going to take us on a tour of his studio for about 30 minutes or so. Then John is going to sit down at his computer and I'll come back on the screen and we'll do a Q&A. I might have some questions of my own, but I'm mainly hoping to forward your questions and observations along to John. So if you're joining us via Zoom, there are a couple ways you can participate in the Q&A. You can type in your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or you can use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. When you use the raise hand button, I'll get a notification that you want to ask a question and we can unmute you so you can ask your question yourself rather than typing it in and having me read it. You will also see that there's a chat button. That's only there in case you need to send a message to me or to our behind the scenes events manager, Jessica Nelson, if you're having like technical issues or something like that. But please don't use the chat button for your questions during the Q&A because it's hard to keep track of them in the chat. Use the Q&A button or the raise hand button for those. If you're here on Facebook Live, welcome. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, just use the comment box on Facebook and we'll be monitoring that. Before I send us over to Greenfield, I would just like to thank Jessica Nelson for her behind the scenes wizardry in bringing this interstate event into your home or your phone. And I'd also like to thank Tim Wessel, who has torn himself away from his duties as chair of the Brattleboro Select Board to be our videographer tonight. And most of all, I would like to thank John Gibson for generously allowing us to visit his studio in this way. John has been working at this art thing for close to 40 years now. He got his undergraduate degree from RISD and his M.F.A. from Yale. He's had dozens of solo exhibitions at galleries throughout the country and one at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center in 2014. His work is in the collections of the Met, the M.F.A. in Boston, the museum at RISD, and the Smith College Museum, among many others. John taught drawing and painting at Smith for over 20 years, having taught previously at RISD, Amherst, and Hampshire College. I am a great, great fan of John's work, and it makes me happy every time I go to our museum to see those huge red and white and black balls that are rolling around inside our window bays. So it's my great pleasure at this point to turn this over to John Gibson.
Danny, thank you. And welcome to Greenfield. And thank you for the opportunity of doing this. Is that too loud? For being here with you. And mostly, thank you for the opportunity of working at the museum with those windows. That was such a fun project. For any of you who don't know, the Brattleboro Museum is nestled in the middle of town, and they've got these great big, beautiful windows. And Danny called me, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so, and said, well, let's do something with these windows. And so I took that opportunity to put details of some of my paintings up there. And right now, as you drive through, you'll see there's these great big balls that look as though they're rolling around inside the building. And that just was a really fun project, and very much due to Danny's thinking and his creativity. And so that was really fun. I thought we'd start by looking at a couple of paintings up here, and I could tell you how I got to that idea of those windows a little bit. We're in the second floor of this building here in Greenfield. It's a big industrial building built in 1875. The top now is living, and the downstairs is a shop and a studio. So I thought we'd start up here and look at a couple of paintings and then move our way down. Behind me is about as big a painting as I've ever made. That's 10 feet across. And this was a series of long, I think about them almost as diving board paintings. And this was pretty much the way I started that detail of the paintings that ended up in the windows in Brattleboro. This is one of the few remaining little details that I painted especially for those windows. And as you can see here, maybe, you can see this was a detail of a painting that was a long horizontal like that. Obviously, unlike these dots, this was a ball with stripes on a dark background and diagonal back and forth, back and forth. And I thought that that lent itself to the windows of the museum, so the darkness would go into the windows. And as Danny is saying, it looks almost as though those balls are rolling around inside. So this is pretty obviously typical of what I do. There's another big one over here. Over the years, I've worked with balls with lots of different kinds of designs on them. Most recently, for the last couple of years, it's just been dots and stripes, and I can talk quite a lot about that if you'd like. Patterns of the balls makes a huge, huge difference. Couple of things just introductory that are important. It's important to me that these aren't actually typical balls. Let's say you go to Walmart, you know, usually they got a great bunch of balls at Walmart. If you pick up, there'll often be a ball with dots on it. The dots on the ball with Walmart will not line up equally from each other. They're like a design that's been pasted on top of a ball. These dots, believe it or not, are actually quite unusual, because if you turn this ball on the other side, all of these dots are going to be exactly the same distance apart from each other. So I'm indebted to a wonderful guy at Smith, a guy named Powatella, who helped me with these designs, and I've spent a great deal amount of time trying to work out those dots so that although it looks like a ball you may have seen before, it's actually quite different, and that's a very important thing about the painting. The other thing I really want to talk about tonight, and I don't know if Tim can show you, I really want to talk about the physicality of these paintings. You know, if people see a picture of the painting, they look as if this might be a very smooth surface, but in fact, they're very, very sculptural. And yeah, right, it helps to have a little bit of light. When I was making these paintings, this is actually a lot of paper collaged and then a whole lot of wax and paint on top of it. So I don't know if you can see that as Tim is showing you there. So what happens is there's the rhythm of the volume of the balls, and at the same time, a kind of sub-rhythm, a sort of flickering, right, of this little bit of geometry there, which is the overlapping of these pieces of paper. That has developed more in the last 1 or 2 years, and we'll go down to the shop and I'll show you that's how it's happening. But that's something I want to emphasize with you this evening. So here are these two big paintings here. Tim and I now are going to walk downstairs. I'm going to show you the woodshop, how I'm making these things now, and then we're going to move into the painting studio, and I'll show you what I'm up to there. Okay, so come on. You're going to carry that? as we go down, Tim might show you in the hallway, there's a combination watercolor and woodcut. I've made many, many works on paper, but now not for quite a while. We're going to walk through a very modest hallway. Now we're in the bottom of the building, and I'm totally excited now because I've moved my studio down to the first floor, and what I'm excited about is that the woodshop is right next to the painting studio. And what's important for me is I'm constantly taking paintings from the studio and literally cutting them up into pieces, putting them back together, going back and painting. So really, I spend as much time here in the woodshop as I do in the painting studio. This is a hugely important part of my process. I got that way because I've painted on wood panel for many years, and I would change the shape of the painting, and you know, I would have lots of remnants like this. I would have tons of them, and I started to put those scraps together. I mean, how fun is that, right? To paint on that, and then eventually I ran out of painting pieces. And so now what has become is I take a piece of plywood, I do a lot of wax and color on that, and then what I do is basically a jigsaw. And then I put these little pieces together. It's laborious, but I find that this surface, which has this geometry underneath it, and even the little holes where I'm putting in screws to glue all this stuff down, informs the volume of the ball, because there's all this flatness happening that's asserted behind it. So, for instance, here's another painting. My feeling is, again, there's all this geometry going on there. It's at odds with the roundness of the ball, and in a funny way, that dichotomy to me seems to make the ball get rounder. I think that if you're a painter, you know, you sort of work in opposites in a funny way, right? You live in a world that's unresolved. It's flat and round at the same time. So I both want to make the painting super flat, and I also want to make it super round. And so that's part of what the collage is doing for me. This particular painting is another one with paper on it. I've sanded this up, I've beat them up a lot. This is one of the paintings that's headed out to California in about 2 weeks for a show I'm having out there in the end of September. Okay, let's head on into the painting studio. Not a long commute. This is the new painting studio, and I'm a little embarrassed because it's so neat and there's not paint on the walls. It doesn't look like I'm working, but I've only been here for 2 or 3 weeks. There's a lot of work in here right now. I'm always working on 7 or 8 paintings at once. This is quite a few because of the pandemic and because I have the show coming up. So it's a little unusual to have quite so many going on. I don't actually look at a setup when I'm painting these things. These are all completely invented. So it's very important that, you know, instead of looking at a still life, I'm looking at the last painting I painted. So you can see this group is really sort of, they're all talking to each other. And then, of course, you know, most recently last week, I was working on these 3. They're all talking to each other. These 2 single balls. And, you know, oftentimes I'm working on a painting, I'm getting 3/4 of the way through this one, and I'm saying, well, geez, this is white with red dots. What would red with white dots look like? And so instead of doing that here, I'll just make another painting. So it's very important that they're in conversation with each other. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about. Here, what I pointed out about paper upstairs and then the other painting in the shop, these are actually the different pieces of wood, right? That I was showing you that I was working on the collage there. And so as I sand into this, or I score it with a straight razor blade, which I do a lot, this geometry underneath begins to come up. It's like I'm excavating a little bit, right? And the same thing I'm saying before, the roundness of the ball is, I think, both at odds with, but also somehow in sync with the super flatness of that painting by virtue of how I'm working that surface, at least hopefully. One way of thinking about these paintings is, you know, I taught painting for a very long time, and you know, the first 2 weeks of drawing one, painting one, at least the way I was doing it back then, was if you take an object, and whatever it was, an apple or something, and the damn thing is you have the apple or the ball, and then you have the non-ball, just space. And it seems like a pretty basic problem, but that dilemma of the ball needing to be itself, but also needing to be part of that world. It needs to be distinct as itself, but it needs to be part of everything. And that first 2, 3 classes of painting one, frankly, is basically what I'm still working on. I find that problem completely compelling and not unlike, you know, the dilemma of being here and trying to talk to you. And I'm kind of stuck in myself here. And I want to be distinct as myself, like the ball, but I also want to be part of the world. And I think that dilemma, that problem, that conundrum of being a separate entity and trying to be part of something is, for me, that's what these paintings are about. So, what else can we talk about? Geometry is a great big part of these paintings. For a long time, I've been very interested in, obviously, the way a design makes a ball round. I've been very involved in ellipses in general, how ellipses describe a surface. Most recently, so, you know, the ball is on this ledge here, the light comes down, the ball is just on the edge of that ledge, like that fantastic Sanchez-Cotan painting. The light comes down and creates this shadow on the ledge. If you want an entertaining evening, you could take a ball and put it on a ledge and shine a light on it. The shadow that's created is just fascinating. To my mind, it's creating another ellipse that ends just at the tip of the ball, and which is completely symmetrical and comes down, completes itself here. Not only that, if you take a pencil or a finger and trace this shadow, it corresponds exactly with the attached shadow on the surface of the ball itself. So it's both flat and spatial at the same time. which is basically for me, I think, you know, what painting is anyways. So that's fun to work with. I spoke before about the problem of the design, and I talked a little bit about Powell Attell at Smith College. It's complicated about the ball. It's complicated to paint it too in terms of trying to get to the essence of its roundness. So for instance, in terms of the design, it makes sense that you would think, well, I'm gonna just take a cloth and I'm gonna drop it on there, and somehow that design is gonna work around the ball. In order to think correctly about the design and also about painting the ball, I think you need to start from the inside. The dots only work symmetrically around that ball if you think about it as a shape that starts in the very inside of the ball and grows. And it turns out that this constellation of dots, there's only a couple that work out, have to do with platonic solids that are inside the ball and where the points of those platonic solids are, the dots are. I'm getting too esoteric. The point of all of that is that the key to thinking about the volume of the ball is getting inside. What else do you want to talk about? Here's the palette. It was a major step when I figured out that instead of a great big pile of paint, I could actually have bins. This is white and black. This is earth, yellow, red, green, and blue. There's always more blue than any other color. I'm not quite sure why that always is. I love oil paint. I love the smell. I love the feel of it. I've got a bunch on my leg here. It's all over me. If I don't have paint under my fingernails, then I get nervous. The feel of oil paint is as important almost really as the color. You know, there are stiff colors, and you know, and then they're really sticky, you know, slimy colors. They're gritty colors. They're sandy colors. They're heavy colors. They're light colors. And I'm not talking about the color so much as actually the actual paint. And so much of painting is yeah, of course, you got to know the color and how the cool, the warm, but the sequence of the kinds of materials that happen are crucial too, and being tuned into that is very important. And I think that's a big part of going into the shop as well. And the materiality of this is crucially important. Color, I'm going to talk about color a little bit. As I said before, there are families of paintings. One painting tends to talk to another one. I spend a lot of time looking at paintings, a little bit hard in the last couple of months. But I spent lots and lots of time online looking at paintings. I think maybe I'm getting older. I find I'm a little more sensitive to the greatness of paintings. I mean, paintings that before to me seemed like pretty ho-hum, just seem incredible. So many wonderful paintings. Oftentimes I'll try, almost like a recipe, to recreate the color world of a painting I've seen before. There is a fabulous Kees van Dongen at the Met in the Lehman wing. Just an incredible portrait of a woman on white with black hair and this crazy icy blue violet highlight. And so in the back of my mind, I'm having a conversation with that painting as I go, although, you know, it's not finished and who knows what's going to happen. But this is, you know, I'm constantly changing the size. And instead of running it through the table saw right away, I've put this tape on the paper just to imagine what would happen if the painting was cut. I don't know, a day or two ago, this was a great big giant red thing, and it may be again. All I got to do is take this off of here. I try not to commit to, you can see how they end up when they're built finally. I try not to do that until the very end and to leave my options for changing the size till the last minute, because I'm constantly changing my mind about that. The proportions are wildly important and affect the feel of the painting, the volume of the ball, the feel of the whole color. It's totally tremendously important. What else have we talked about? I haven't talked about the ball thing. I guess I should talk about the ball thing a little bit. I've been painting for, a long time. My mom set me up with oil paints when I was about 7 years old. I've been painting these balls for, 30 years. And that's been just about it. The balls first started because I was studied abstract art in graduate school, and I was just interested in formal painting. And when I got out of graduate school, I decided pictorial space was the most important tool. So how was I going to incorporate that into my formalism? So that's easy enough. You know, you pick an object, you start to paint, a pot, a pan, bottle of wine, whatever you choose. The problem is, as soon as you do that, your painting starts to tell a story. What kind of wine is it? What kind of apple is it? Who ate the apple? Is it an old apple? Is it what? The stem is going over. What does that mean? And I found myself telling stories I wasn't interested in, and so many figurative paintings told stories I wasn't interested in. And so I began to invent geometric objects that could use pictorial space that didn't necessarily lend themselves to one particular narrative or another. Somewhere along the line there, I don't know, late 80s, I suppose, I started to paint a ball. That was one of the things I invented. It was 2 balls. Then there was a pile of balls. It seemed to suit my need for a pictorial organization where I could have all of my formal stuff, and the balls seemed to open up into an interesting place to think about that wasn't terribly specific. I think if I'm doing my job well, that a lot of people can come at these paintings with quite different interpretations of what they mean, and I think that that's a good thing. So they've sustained me and continue to sustain me, and I think on a very good day, I come down here and I say, geez, I haven't even begun to paint the balls, and that's actually really the way I feel. I really do still feel like I'm just beginning. So I don't know, how's that?
Good. We did forget the laptop.
Oh, we forgot the laptop. You're absolutely right.
We could go.
30 seconds. I'll run and get it. Oops. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay.
My
So-
cue was you forgot the laptop.
I'm sorry, we forgot to.
We knew you were
Can
going to forget
see
the
me and
laptop.
everything?
What's that?
And is everything working?
Yeah, I think so. John, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you wonderfully.
Okay, okay. That was fantastic, John. And I hope everyone appreciates the fact that Tim is there with you behind the camera, but you're basically just there alone in your studio speaking to the camera. Seems like
It is a little disconcerting. I was thinking about Kamala and Joe last night, right? They're talking to everybody, but there was no applause, and it's a bizarre time. Yeah.
It's a bizarre time for sure. I was responding to my computer screen each time you asked a question, just so you know.
Good.
That was so enlightening and fantastic. I'm sure for many of the people who are watching, certainly the case for me, to get some insight into the depth of what's going on in those paintings and what's going on in your mind and what you've been doing over all these years in this work that is so often, for obvious reasons, just described as he does paintings of balls. I really loved hearing you speak about all
Thank you.
all the different layers of what's going on in your work. I jotted down a few questions and thoughts, but I see that someone has their hand up, so we're going to try to make this work. So I think I can call on this person, and then we should be able to hear her, and she should be able to ask her question herself. If that doesn't work, then I would just encourage you to type the question in the Q&A. And the same goes for everyone else. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A or use the raise hand button. But here we go. Let's see if we can make this work. Janine?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's working. Amazing. John, thank you so much.
Thanks, Janine.
This is so amazing. So I have a materials question for you because it was so great to see what you're doing in the woodworking shop. And then we saw the oil paints that you're working with, but you didn't talk to us about the wax. So I'm really curious about the wax, what it's for, why it's in there, how you do it. Tell us about the wax.
Yes, fun. Yeah, it's a little like click and clack here. This is a jolly. For many years, I've used cold wax, and I make my own cold wax. You know, there's a lot of recipes for it, but it's quite easy to make. You got to do it outside because it smells awful. It's a combination of beeswax and paint thinner and Damar varnish and a little linseed oil if you've got it around. And you heat it up in a double boiler. And like I say, it just smells awful. But you heat it up until it all cools. And then it's a wonderful material you can take any stiff paint and make it transparent. I love that stuff. And I've been using that for many years. You can buy it, but it's crazy expensive and much cheaper and more fun to make yourself. More recently, I've just begun to do a little bit of encaustic, which is a whole other thing, and I'm just a beginner. It's one of the few things I really haven't experimented much with. And I do it on those panels before I cut it up. And that's a mixture of pellets mixed with wax that have already been mixed with Damar. And you gotta heat up and you put it on the panel while it's still hot and it cools immediately. And I use it because it makes a wonderful texture on that plywood that I then cut up and collage. Does that make sense?
Wow, yeah. And then you can paint right on top of that wax.
Yeah.
Encaustic.
Yeah, but you know, encaustic it's a whole world, and like I say, I'm just beginning to use it, and I'm no expert on it. but I urge you to try it. And, you know, it's this wonderful American flag paintings by Jasper Johns, and, you know, the wonderful encaustic paintings throughout history. It's a wonderful medium and can deliver color really beautifully. But it's complicated, and there's some health aspects to it. So, you know, it takes some research. Those fumes can be nasty.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. John, I wanted to let you know, so this is being recorded, and so we'll share the video at some point. And I think you'll agree when you get a chance to see it. The paintings look amazing on the screen, and a few people chatted to me that they would swear the balls are three-dimensional coming off the.
Yeah, I'm in a bad mood about it today, but thank you.
No, they look great, and also you make an evening alone with a ball and a ledge and a light sound really.
The shadow on the ledge is fun.
Really exciting. I had no idea the story you shared about the shift from actual objects to geometric shapes and then balls that had to do with getting away from stories that were creeping in that you didn't want to tell.
Yeah, I think stories may not be the exact right word. My dad was an English professor, a rhetorician, and words were always an important sort of part of life growing up. And so another way to think about it is either if you're with someone or you're by yourself, what is the conversation you're having about a painting, or what are the questions you can or can't ask? And so another way of saying that is, you know, I wanted to make a painting that when you looked at it, you didn't just go, oh, there were, you know, there's an apple next, because that's a closed-end conversation. It was something provocative about the situation or about the subject that was not an easily answered question, and it'll just left something dangling. And that's why I also say about painting, I think to be particularly a figurative painter, you just have to live with a sort of lack of closure. You know, it's a bunch of opposites and a bunch of things that are open. It's just a crazy thing to try to make space and volume out of a flat thing all day when it's ultimately impossible. It's a funny day job.
You know, you said something, and it's in line with a lot of what you've been saying about the work. You said something about how something is at odds with and in sync with at the same time. And, you know, I feel like that kind of, I often feel like that kind of language is just art speak that I never really am sure what that means. But as you've talked about it tonight, and that tension in your work between the 2D and the 3D, and the materiality and the image, I think that's what you mean when you're
it's
really makes sense.
It's pretty basic stuff. There are lots and lots of painters who do that thing, and you know, lots and lots of painters who are dealing with this figure ground issue in a certain way. I mean, Anselm Kiefer, this monumental German artist, great painter. I mean, of amazing physicality. Oh my God, there'll be a little toy, not so toy submarine screwed onto a painting, and yet from a distance, you know, those paintings can be incredibly atmospheric. And so that's that same dichotomy, just times 10. I think he's incredible at that. And he can turn stuff into atmosphere and atmosphere back into stuff in a wonderful way. And yeah, I aspire to that. I think that's fantastic.
In light of what you've been saying about your work, it occurs to me that the project we did in the windows at the museum was really a departure in ways that I hadn't fully appreciated when it was underway. I mean, figuring out how to photo reproduce them, and then dealing with a printed canvas mounted on a board. Was it satisfying? Was it interesting? Was it enjoyable? Did it
was
spark any
all
new?
of those things, and also working with everybody at the museum, and everyone was so creative and fun and into it. It was so great, and it was a whole. Yes, you're absolutely right. It was a whole different departure for me, and yeah, sure. Afterwards, I said to myself, well, gee, John, maybe you should, think about doing more of these, or you're gonna, begin to do that sort of instead. I think I'd be interested in it if another occasion arose, but, I think my job is to follow through with this crazy project that I've begun, and I don't know the way it may appear. It may appear that the end game of the project is already set in stone, but I don't feel that way. I don't know where this is all going to end up, and I think my job is to stick around in the studio and work on paintings. But I love the opportunity, and it's so fun to drive through Brattleboro and see those great big balls rolling around. It's just fun.
I certainly feel that way. Have you seen them at night, lit up at night?
I haven't seen them. How do they look?
I think they look fantastic. When you get a chance, you should look at them at night. One of the things that I so appreciated about the way you approached that project was you gave so much thought to how the image was going to relate to the space, like the cavity of the window bays, in a way that I think resulted in them feeling less like posters put up on boards in windows, and really like they're really engaged with the physical space of the window bays in a perfect way.
Well, I think that the fact, the little one I showed upstairs, the fact that it has the dark background, it's much more Baroque than any of these paintings down here, so that the dark background could enter into the inside of the museum, and it's fun that pictorial space, you don't know how far into the museum it goes. So I was very aware, not just of the space of those windows, but the depth of the whole building and the feel of the whole building. And it's such a, solid, beautiful piece of stony architecture. I wanted to be, again, in sync with that, but at the same time, kind of it's fun to make that building a little playful, because it's such a serious building. It was fun to have fun with it and bounce the balls around. And that was just a fun opportunity.
Great. It couldn't have worked out better from our perspective. It was fun for me when you came down the steps to be reminded that you sometimes do watercolors.
Oh, yes, there it is. It's funny. I've spent many years doing watercolors, and I've spent many years doing prints, and you would think it would be a no-brainer that, having gone to the collage thing with the painting, that I would have been able to do that with the works on paper. And I was determined not to make any works on paper until I could get them to catch up with the oil paintings in that respect. But oh man, how many days and money I've spent chasing that one down. What I have found is a piece of watercolor paper has a life to it, and it sparkles if you put a wash on or color on just right. But in my experience, as soon as I begin to collage it, the life goes out, it dies. And I simply have not found a way to make a collaged watercolor painting that is as lively as I wanted the watercolors to be. So right, that remains a conundrum.
That makes so much sense, and that it was that's why it was surprising to me to realize that you've also done watercolors, because it seems like what you're engaged with in terms of materiality now, and yeah, that would be extremely hard to achieve in the watercolor. However, the exhibit that we did in 2014, if I remember correctly, had a very large watercolor. When you walked in through the door, it took up the whole wall on the left.
Yep.
That was not collaged, right? That was
No,
that was just one. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, and it's a very, the whole, the whole state of mind, the way your body is, the way you hold a brush, your attitude, the whole world of watercolor painting is a completely different mind-body set than what I'm doing with these oil paintings. I mean, I can kill these and cut them up and throw them out and go back to the dump and save them and bring them back, But a watercolor painting, it really can be killed so easily, and it's a very different kind of thing.
Yeah, understood. You talked a lot about dots.
Yes.
You threatened to talk a lot about stripes, but
I
you
never
didn't.
did.
That's okay. I mean, if you want to, please feel free. The question I was going to ask, I feel like I've seen paintings of yours that have like swirls, or like I associate them with like Native American patterns or something like that.
There were spirals, and for a long time I was working with a Maori design.
A Maori design, okay.
And why am I only doing? I'm always bothered by the idea of frivolity and decoration. It's like I want to. I just want to keep it just as basic as I possibly can. So I think that those designs, I don't know, they seem too. I don't know, too much fun.
Too fussy. Too much what?
Too much fun.
Oh yeah.
The stripes, briefly. I'm sorry I didn't have the whole painting. It's no longer here. That I borrowed those details from. A line of balls that is stripes is very, very different from the line of balls that's dots, because a stripe has a direction. Where the culminating dot is, it points the ball that way, almost like an eyeball. And so a line of stripes is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and a back and forth dance. A line of dots is going to be much more sparkly all over. And so the dance is very different. I have thought about choreography a lot in terms of these paintings, especially those lines of balls on a shelf. I am interested in the ballet. So what sort of the dance that the stripes do is different from the dance that the dots do.
Have you ever collaborated with a choreographer?
I haven't, but that would be jolly.
I mean, you think that's potentially something you'd be interested in?
Sure. I'm interested in. I'm interested in whatever.
Well, I get the luxury of seeing you now and then, and talking with you and asking you questions, and I'm hogging up the time here, and so I just want to make sure that if anyone who among you who are tuned in would like to ask questions, please don't be shy. Use the Q&A button and type them in.
Yes, auto repair.
Or raise hand.
Whatever.
Please don't hesitate to do that. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up in just a couple minutes. I'm curious, John. So many painters I've been speaking to, or artists in general, I've been speaking to these last few months, say, pandemic, life isn't all that different than how it's been for me. I live a kind of socially distanced life under normal circumstances. I'm Curious how things have been for you.
Mostly, yes. I mean, my work life hasn't changed at all. As you know, Greenfield is not the most populous place in the world. And so being here has been safe and calm, but as Frank Auerbach said, what a painter requires is solitude and monotony. And solitude turns out to be a good way to sort of hide out during a pandemic. But at least for me, it's also been the way I work. So yeah, so it's all my life I've spent a lot of time alone, and that continues to be the case. And I'm just comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's good. One of the unexpected effects of this strange time that we're living in is that it has opened our eyes at the museum to being able to do things like this.
Yes.
And you know, we have an audience tuned in right now that's probably more people than we could comfortably fit in your studio had we done this in person the way we had imagined.
Right.
And probably people from far afield who, you know, wouldn't have been able to show up in person even had they wanted to. So there, we've really been seeing some benefits in that way as we get into this kind of virtual programming.
Well, it's great. It's great you're hosting these things. It's really fun. It's terrific.
Well, it's, you know, this is the first one we've done like this, and it's really, really generous of you to sort of be a guinea pig for us.
Totally.
Someone here has raised her hand named Susan, so I'm going to try to enable her to make a comment or ask a question. Allowed to talk is not available because Susan's using an older version of Zoom. Susan, I'm sorry. Maybe type your question in the Q&A instead, or your comment. And I'm going to try calling on Greer instead. Let's see if this works. Greer, I think you might be on mute. Oh, I think I can unmute you. Hold on. Greer.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Good.
Hi, Greer.
Hey, John. I think this thing is, I love this approach because I'm a painter myself, but you see on video stuff, they're doing, galleries are doing, taking you down through their hallways and showing you the various paintings and everything. But this is, you almost feel like you're seeing John doing the work. And it's, to me, it's much more interesting than any approach I've seen to this pandemic. I think it would even work in I think it would be very useful in non-pandemic times.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Well,
totally agree.
maybe we'll do another one where I'm actually making a painting like the you know, I don't know what that's, the happy painter. I love that show. I've always wanted to do it.
Bob Ross?
Yes, and, you know,
Happy little trees.
Cabin,
Yeah.
I'm painting the little ball, and it's a happy ball. That would be fun.
Yeah. I agree with you, Greer, and yet I acknowledge that John is really good at this too. So probably
he didn't leave you empty with him just standing there. He had things, he thinks about it, obviously, and he can express what it's like to do what he's doing and why he's doing it. I always wondered, I saw your balls, John, on Newbury Street. I can't remember which gallery it was.
That was a long time ago.
And I thought, wow, those are great. And I saw this thing that you had in the Brattleboro Museum, that you were still painting the balls. And I thought, wow, that takes a real focus.
Well, either that or just a lack of
I don't think so. It's depth, real depth.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Greer. Susan typed in her question, and it was, how will we access the video afterwards?
No, that's a good question.
So this whole session is being recorded, and I think it takes maybe a day or two for us to get it uploaded to our YouTube channel. And then, so if you follow the Brattleboro Museum, any of the ways we communicate with the world, like maybe you subscribe to our e-newsletter, and if you don't, you can go to our website, which is brattleboromuseum.org, and choose to subscribe to it. Or if you follow us on social media on Facebook or Instagram, we'll share a link to the video that way. We'll probably also within a few days get a link to the video on the webpage on our website for John's exhibit. Or you just go to YouTube and search maybe like Brattleboro Museum, John Gibson, and you'll find it that way. But we'll get it up on YouTube within a few days. Any other questions or thoughts from the audience? Or John, anything you're wishing that you had addressed or that someone had? Oh, here comes one more question. It's from Bettina, so hopefully I can make this work. Bettina.
Can you hear me now?
Bettina,
this comes in the
yes.
This comes in the form of a huge thank you to both of you, and also to encourage you, Danny, to keep this up, because for so many of us during this difficult time, it's wonderful to have my mind so engaged and my soul so satisfied, and to really be transported to another space. So this is a huge thank you.
Well, Bettina, thank you.
You're so welcome. You're
That's
so
great.
welcome. I'm so glad that you've appreciated this event and the others that I know you've tuned in for. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
John, any final thoughts?
Danny, I feel like
That's all right.
I've done it. I'm sure as soon as we turn off, I'll think of some brilliant thing to say, and then.
I just want to forewarn you of the anticlimax as soon as we end this, because unlike being all together and you know, get people then come up to you afterwards and say some nice words, as soon as we end this, we're all alone in our rooms again.
Tim's still here.
Well, Tim's there. That's true. So let me say before we all depart, again, how much I appreciated this. How excellent a job you did with this task. I think there's maybe a career here or another career sideline for you in doing these kinds of presentations. And I want to say one more time just how much I love your work.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to know you and to get a chance to see your work and to have it up at our museum.
Well, and you know, what I appreciate is the collaborative nature of that whole project and the collaborative nature of this whole thing. And it's what's wonderful about the Brattleboro Museum. And you guys are just doing this whole thing in a wonderful, it's the best thing I can say, creative way. And it's great. I really appreciate being part of it.
Thank you. And thank you again to all of you who tuned in. Our next presentation is 2 weeks from now. The curator of the exhibit we have up in our main gallery right now, which features large portraits suspended from the ceiling of people who are experiencing homelessness. The curator of that exhibit is going to be at the museum doing a walkthrough and talking about that exhibit. So hope all of you will tune back in for that. Thank you again, John. Thank you, Jessica, for your behind the scenes wizardry. And thank you, Tim,
Thank you, Tim,
for the videography. There he is. And stay safe, everyone. Wear your masks, vote,
Whoa.
do what we need to do to turn this ship around. Thanks, everyone.